Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast, Perfect Prey. As I call my podcast Perfect Prey because I believe that abusers prey upon their victims and that ideally, of course, children become the perfect prey for abusers and they become weaponized oftentimes in divorce, custody proceedings, and separation. It's a way for an abuser to retain control over their adult victim, and they use the children to do this. So I have Gwen and Grace here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, they are going to talk about their experiences about growing up in a home with a coercive controller, narcissistic abuser. For my listeners, narcissistic abuse is what a lot of people are familiar with. What narcissistic abusers do is they coerce and control. That's what they do. So that's why I like to use the words together. So I would love if you guys could please, and we know that this conversation can be challenging and overwhelming. And also that if you're a young person listening, hopefully this conversation is very validating that, you know, the experiences you've had, you shouldn't have had, and that the system should be protecting children from abusers. I would love if you guys would start off by telling us a little bit about your background and where you are today.
Yeah. So to begin, we lived with an abuser since we were born, obviously. And unfortunately, our mother was that abuser in our lives. And she used many forms of abuse. And it really mainly started to get really bad once our father left. It was very difficult to point out exactly when we started to realize, hey, this isn't right. But of course, it started to become a lot more intense and in your face, different types of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, especially when we got older and started to break free from our mother's control. And yeah, there became like a stark difference between our mom and our dad's house once they split. So it was when we were younger, we were abused when our dad wasn't home. And then when our dad broke away from our mom, we were stuck with her for a little while where we experienced things that just weren't normal. We continued to just disassociate from what was happening at our mom's house whenever we went to our dad's house. So it was a very safe space at our dad's house. It was very calm. We felt like just at ease. And our moms were always constantly stressed out, constantly just on edge. Those flight and fight responses were really kicking in a lot more at our mom's house than at our dad's.
And what you're speaking to is, so as a researcher, I studied specifically what happens to children living in abusive homes. And they will have these trauma responses. Sometimes it's fight, right? I'm going to fight back, or I'm going to refuse to listen. I'm just going to be really angry a lot. And what we know is that abusers often end up having that as their primary trauma response, because we have to assume abusers suffer trauma, but not everybody becomes an abuser when they suffer trauma. And so then there's the flight response where you're disassociating and maybe overcompensating in other parts of your life, right? I have clients who their children are like the A student or the best on the hockey team. And if they're not the best, they feel like an absolute failure, right? That's like the flight response. The freeze is disassociating, maybe engaging in lots of video gaming or using other things to cope. And then the fawn. But what I appreciate is that you're talking about the anxiety, because every single child who is living between the home of an abuser and the home of a protective parent, when they are going back to that home of the abuser, their life is about living in a dysregulated state. There's no other way. You have to live in that survival mode.
Yes.
Yeah, like walking on eggshells, I'm sure, a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. That's just the way we lived. It felt like going to our dad's house was just a little vacation. It never felt like we were like living here. It was always my life is at our mom's house. Our life is there. It's just going away for a little bit, having a little break, and then we go back to real life. And that's just how I felt. There was just no escape, and you always knew that it was in the back of your head that you were gonna be in trouble, or you're always going back. Unpredictable. Yeah. It was too unpredictable to be like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen when I go back home. I know exactly what's going to happen. But no, it was always different. No idea. It's always ever changing.
So stability. Stability was gone, right?
Yes.
And so what we know about abusers, they tend to be, even if they're spoiling children, because some do. I know that wasn't necessarily the case in your
No.
situation,
Oh,
but some do, that they're omnipresent, which means they're present even when they're not present. There's always this knowing that person is around in some way. In some way, you can't be yourself. Children learn that they just can't be. That creates a lot of anxiety and dysregulation in our body. Our body feels it. And I think that's what you're describing is like not knowing what you were going to walk into, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So another thing that we like struggled with a lot was she really babied us a lot. And that's something she used to control us. Like we weren't allowed to make our own food. We weren't allowed to get our own water. We weren't allowed to leave the house. We weren't allowed to leave or go downstairs by ourselves. We weren't allowed to do like just normal activities till I guess we were like right when we were rebelling against her, trying to leave. We were like, I don't know, 11, 12. That's when we started to make our own food in the morning, start get our own drink. And she got really angry at that. And that's when the tension really started to mount, especially when we got older. Like we saw the stark difference between our mom and our dad's house. And from those like just small things.
I appreciate that you saw the stark difference. Some of my clients, the children, actually are confused because the abuser's house feels really, there's something there. They know that's not right. But oftentimes the abuser is spoiling them or giving them whatever they want. And then they go to the protective parent's house and they're told by the abusive parent that the protective parent doesn't really love them or isn't really a good parent. So then the children get a message which parent is safe and they don't know that. Did you guys
yeah.
have?
We had as well, once our dad separated from our mom, he met our stepmom. And when that relationship started, we had a lot of times in which our mother would have conversations with us. And I would always be putting down the other parent, being like, if your dad does this, I do this differently. And this is the correct way to do it. Or that your stepmom's not really your parent. So you can't ever put any faith or reliance in her, and all of these long conversations or statements that she expected us to take as fact. But we, of course, as we got older, we're like, hey, that's not really how this feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like relationship, just long sit down conversations where she's, your stepmom isn't your real mom. And she'd be very serious about it. And then we'd be like, whoa there, what's happening? I'm your mom. You have to believe what I say. You have to believe me. You have to trust me in this.
No true reasons behind any of it.
Yeah. It's like, just because I'm your mother, you have to believe me type of thing.
Sure. So there was an attempt to triangulate, we call it, right? So there was an attempt to triangulate, but you guys seem to have some pretty good discernment. Like you were able to say, this doesn't feel right. And perhaps, sadly, that might have been because she also was abusive in other ways. And I'm so sorry you experienced that other level of abuse. And what we know is that non-physical abuse can cause just as much suffering. So you've had a combination of this physical abuse that is very much, however it manifests, sexually or otherwise, this physical abuse, and then this psychological warfare almost. It's like almost like a psychological torture, like a mind bending of our reality, making us question ourselves. And I wanted to point out, you said something about like she would sit you down, she'd try to have these conversations with you. And what we know about abusers is they tend to rate very high on a personality scale as disagreeable. So creating conflict, right? They're drawn towards conflict, but also neurotic. And so they get obsessed about certain things, right? Obsessed about the stepmother, obsessed about your relationship with your father, right? Like obsessions become, it's really challenging for abusers to disengage, which is why I want to talk about this. So you guys have been engaged in the family court system for a long period of time, trying to stay safe at your dad's house, right?
Yeah. Yes. Our dad's house is our safe place. And when we were like right before our freshman year of high school, we left our mom's house. We've had her come to agreement. We talked about how we wanted to make a different schedule, go to our dad's every week and see our mom every other weekend. And we fought about this a lot. And then she finally agreed. And that like next day, she just filed in court. And that's started our custody battle.
Yeah, we had talked for a really long time about how our going into high school, our first high school year, we were like, we really want to know that we'll be able to complete our work and be on top of this new environment. And we knew that we wouldn't be able to do that if we'd stayed at our mom's.
Yeah.
And so we'd had several conversations like, hey, we really want this to try. We added as try a new schedule. And we had planned with our mother, and she had agreed to it to our face, that we would meet every other weekend with her and stay at our dad's house during the school week in order to help us with our schoolwork and make sure that we were on top of things. But as soon as that actually happened, where we went to our dad's, she filed immediately in court, and we've been stuck there for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Would you guys, because I have a lot of moms on here and dads listening, protective parents who have children who like had to go through guardian ad litems and evaluations.
We had all of those.
All those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my experience has been oftentimes that a lot of these people, these court professionals, first of all, tend to just go for 50-50 shared custody. That's number one. But number two, did you feel like these professionals actually got to know you really well?
So we started out when our parents got divorced, they had 50-50 custody over us. And then that was there for like a few years until we left. And now in the court system, they realized that we have 50-50, so they can't fight for that anymore. And we met with our guardian ad litem, I think 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And the entire time we were with her, she was very disinterested. And we never saw any of the things that we told her we wanted or any of our experiences ever shared within the court system. Yeah. So our judges oftentimes
didn't hear our voices at all. Like, we were just very much overlooked. It's like we described what happened to us, what we wanted to be said in court. Hey, can you say this in court on our behalf? Just please say this.
That's your job.
Exactly. It's like we're pleading for her just to do her job. And she wouldn't do it. She'd stay silent. She wouldn't say anything. And we'd come back and we'd be like, so how'd it go? What happened? And she'd be like, oh, I didn't think it was relevant at the time.
I didn't think it was relevant. And then after that, we started raising our voices on social media about it. And after we called her out in one of our videos, she left our case. And then we got placed with a child representative who we talked with once. And the entire time we were on that call, he talked about himself and asked about 3 or 4 questions relating to us. And we got about 20 words out the entire time we were on that call for about 2 hours.
Yeah. He just talked about all his previous cases, how amazing he was. And it was awful.
Wow. Yeah. This is the problem, I think, right? So when evaluators either tend to go directly for 50-50 just because they're trying to be fair, even if there's an abuser, which makes no sense at all. Yeah. It's literally the most mind-blowing thing. What I have found is in the family court system, there is not a bias to protect children. And that should be everyone's bias. It should be everyone's. Yet for some reason, these individuals who work in the court system, not all of them, but many of them are afraid to speak up. And then I also have found that they don't really get to know the case really well, like really listen to what happened to you. Because, I think a lot of people would say, oh, how do you know that Gwen and Grace weren't manipulated to say these things about their mother? Isn't that kind of right? I'm sure you were gaslit in the relationship a lot, right? You've experienced all kinds of gaslighting, and that people were like, how do you know? And I always say, and I'm a therapist also, just get to know Gwen and Grace. Just literally sit down with them and have a conversation with them, not once, maybe twice, maybe probably more like 3 or 4 times, where you truly get to know, are they being coached and manipulated to say these things, or is this their truth? And no one took the time. No one's taken the time to do that for you.
No, we had one therapist. She was a reunification therapist. Her name was Gwen Waldman. I had 1 session with her, and Grace had 2 sessions. And after both of our first sessions, we noticed a major change in how our mom was acting. And this was right after Gwen had directly asked us. She was like, hey, what could your mom do that would make you want to go back to her?
And she made us make a list.
She had us make a list. And then as soon as Grace went to her second session with
my
her,
second session, I walked in and I was like, oh my God, you're just so amazing. You like fixed my mom. She sent me a whole thing about how she's going to do this and this, everything on my list, by the way, and how that was going to fix her relationship. And I was like, oh my God, you're so amazing. And then she's like, oh yeah, because I sent it to your mom. I was like, what? And I'm like, so you broke my confidentiality? So what are you doing here? And it's like, I don't know. They're just so, if you get them to be full of themselves, they get them to brag about themselves. They like to spill how they're like hurting you. These professionals, they're all corrupt in a way, especially if they're appointed by the court and they were already friends with our mom's personal therapist and communicating through the same practice.
Oh, so, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's it feels like an egregious ethical violation.
Yeah, that's what we thought. And that previous therapist, that our mom's previous personal therapist, was also a court therapist.
A court reunification therapist.
Yeah. And we also saw her before. And then our mom thought that now she's her personal therapist. And then we got another one appointed by the court, but same practice, same people.
Same practice, same people. Same lawyers as well who are associated with the company, and they're all interconnected, which is all wonderful to know.
Yeah. You probably know I recently co-authored a book, Framed Woman in the Family Court Underworld, because it highlights experiences of women and mothers in the family court system. The court system tends to be gender biased, for sure. However, the reality is that whether it's the mother that's the abuser or the father that's the abuser, how is it that the courts are not don't have trained professionals who actually are looking out for the best interests of children? And so that's what you're really speaking to here, is that there's a collusion going on. There's relationships that people get hired simply because they know the right person. And then obviously, I'm sure your father had to pay a lot of money, and your mother, for these reunification therapists and this guardian ad litem and all of these things. When the person, like you said, basically said nothing or talked about themselves, rather than saying, we don't even have to keep this in the court anymore. Why keep this in the court? These two young girls are not safe. They don't feel safe. They aren't safe. There's a history going on in this family system. It just feels crooked, frankly.
Yes, yeah, sure. There was another instance as well when we had DCFS come and we had the guardian litem speak to it, and they were all involved with each other, DCFS and our guardian litem. And we described what happened directly to DCFS, directly to our guardian litem, and they did nothing. It was we have DCF reports, we have police reports. In the courts are doesn't matter. It's fine.
That's what happens, right? If your dad and mom were not divorcing and they were still together, and I used to work for child welfare and I saw this all the time. So if they were still together and you guys, there was a report about an incident, right? One of your parents would have been arrested, right? You would have gone to a safe home, a cousin, a relative, whatever. You would have been taken out of the home, or whoever had abused you. So let's say in this case, your mom had abused you. Then your father would have had to keep you safe in that home, right? But now let's let your father go file for divorce and go into family court. And now all of a sudden, anything that happened that was really egregious, that the system had been not wanting your mother near you, now all of a sudden, this is a family court issue. It's not a child welfare issue. And that's the problem, right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about, you're so young, you're so confident, and it's pretty apparent that you have been able to feel safe and be able to be regulated and be able to be yourselves. And I'm just so grateful that you can speak out about this. Can you tell us a little bit about your healing journey? How has this happened for you?
Yeah, we definitely, the main thing has been the ability to actually escape. We do have a home that we can go to where we're not being abused, we're not being harmed by the people around us. And I think that one of the main things that has been time. It took a very long time for us to actually get our bodies regulated and stop having to go immediately into those flight and freeze ideas in our head that had been constantly plaguing us all the time. And then we also had a very great support system of going into high school, having new friends and people who were going to stand by our side and actually be there for us. And I think definitely those people around us and the time that we've had has helped heal immensely. And we've been able to understand what's happening more and put words and names to what went on behind us in the past, as well as what's currently happening to us in this court system. And that's made all the difference.
That's amazing. No, I'm sure it has. Just having support and being able to be you made me think about all the children that I know who are forced into time with their abuser.
Yeah.
And
they try.
They try.
They try.
I think I would imagine that at 17, I would have to hope that by now you guys are safe, even though they'll keep trying to maybe make dad spend more money and go back to court. But I would hope, it seems that the court system in general seems less interested the older a child gets, and you guys are 17 now. I would hope for your sake, but I'm sure there's always in your head, what's next, right?
Definitely, we were in a lot of danger, especially a few years ago and last year. And there's always threats from our mom, and there's always big things in the court where, oh, we're going to send you to reunification camp. Oh, we're going to send you to separate boarding schools. Once it's not reunification camp, then it's something else. And we're always afraid of these things. It's something that haunts us, especially in the summer where we were like basically trapped in our house because people were outside or stuff like that. There's always something that's scary that's happening.
We're hoping that it dissipates, but at this point, it hasn't as of late.
It hasn't as of late.
They keep pushing. We thought it'd be better once you turn 17, but they decide to push it again.
I think that often we don't have a lot of kids in this area specifically where we are that speak out against abuse. I know around me that there are unfortunately a lot of kids around who do suffer abuse but can't put a name to it. Even at our age that we're at right now, it's mostly emotional abuse that they suffer. But unfortunately, it doesn't get into the court systems a lot, and there aren't a lot of DCFS cases. And so we're one of the only family court cases dealing with this sort of thing. And so I think that they like to take their time and focus, because we're still not 18 in their eyes, still these tiny children that they can move around and use to get more
don't
money.
Have a voice, apparently.
Weaponize. It's a weaponization of children, and that's coercive control. It's called parental coercive control, when one parent is coercing and controlling not only you guys, and that's what happened in the family system, because coercive control is physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, it's everything. But then using the court system to coercively control. Yeah. And then also the court system is trying to coerce and control you, right? Yeah. They're creating all these tactics to further abuse and inflict harm. Yeah.
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 I mean,
whoa.
It's like, don't get to speak at all is the thing. All we do is request to speak. Just let us say our piece. Let us say what happened to us directly. So it's not he said, she said. And that's why this keeps dragging on. No one gets to hear our side, basically. And that's all they need to hear, I feel like. But obviously, it's not going to work either way.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, your voice doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Sadly. Right? Mm-hmm. Wow. Hopefully this summer will be less stressful.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yes.
Hopefully, getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
I'm assuming good therapists, people who can support you in this process, right? Yeah. I know there's amazing therapists out there. I think all too often, there's also these other therapists who, when children go, they're not heard, or they're gaslit into thinking, or they're actually forced into time with the abuser. And that's extremely harmful and scary. So I'm glad you have a safe space there too. Wow. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add for our listeners?
I think one of the main things is definitely for kids, that if you are in this situation or in one of these situations, you can raise your voice. You're not silent. You do have one, even if people aren't going to listen to it. You can still say something, because there's always going to be at least someone out there who will hear it. And even if they don't do anything about it, it's at least you tried and you put your voice out there for the world to hear.
I love that. I love that. And know that you're not alone, that you're not crazy, that, if something doesn't feel right, probably isn't right. No matter what somebody's words are telling you, actions speak louder than words, that the kids have agency. You have a right to have that voice. And if you tag Gwen and Grace, I'm sure they'll share your information and I will too. So we are two people who will immediately be sure to support you. But yeah, I think that social media can be tricky, right?
Oh, yes.
But because of social media, now there's more and more young people who have voice, which is really wonderful to watch.
I definitely say don't settle. Go with your gut, trust yourself, and just go for it because it's better than being stuck in that situation, even if it makes you got to protect your peace. If it makes you survive, if it makes you protect yourself, then that's always worth it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys being on. For those of you who are listening, remember to subscribe to Perfect Prey and please be sure to share this story with other young people who might be experiencing this. As Tina Swithin, One Mom's Battle says, the children are coming and we're helping as much as we can to get their voices out. So thank you so much for being on, both of you.
Thank you.